So I've seen that Dovetail Games has announced a whole load of new add-ons coming to Train World 3. Because, you know, they need to constantly churn out more and more add-ons to take people's minds off the ongoing bugs with previous add-ons that they usually can't be bothered to fix. It's not necessarily a bug, but why do we still not have multiplayer in the game, especially when it was explicitly promised by Matt Peddleston himself in a preview video for the old TSW CSX Heavy Haul many years ago. In this video I will be going over what was announced, and giving my initial thoughts on it all. I'll start off by saying that there's no way in hell I'll ever be getting all of these add-ons, because I'm not a teacher's pet who rarely, if ever, says anything bad about DTG. There are two sellout channels in particular that I want to mention, but I will not do that to try and avoid nasty fights. Of course DTG just had to stick with the UK, US and Germany again. I get that those are the three biggest markets, but considering the game has the word world in its name, it's about time we started getting routes from all around the world. And yes, that was a Daft Punk reference. Sure, we do have one Canadian, one French and two Swiss routes in the game, but they all suffer from an all too common problem where they are far too boring and linear. It is for that very reason I have avoided getting the Swiss S-Bahn route and the Marseille to Avignon remake. And recently I made a video talking about a whole load of routes that I'd like to see made for TSW, although I can't imagine that any of them ever will be made. So, the first thing I want to talk about is something that I already know of. The long overdue addition of Amtrak's Acela Express electric train. Thankfully DTG are making the original rather than those fugly Avalia Liberty things, and it will be an add-on for the Boston to Providence route. Probably goes without saying, but the Acela is a much needed addition to the route, just like more MBTA rolling stock, hint, and I look forward to being able to drive this unit in game, even though it'll only be on a pathetically short 43-mile section of track. In real life you'll see the Acela trains running on Washington DC to Boston, Massachusetts services alongside the Siemens ACS 64. North of Wickford Junction, Amtrak services rub shoulders with MBTA's Providence/Stoughton line trains, though they do not stop at Wickford Junction themselves. Speaking of which, why was the Providence to Wickford Junction section omitted from Boston Sprinter? It would have made the route a more desirable 62 miles long instead of the barely acceptable 43. Next add-on I want to discuss is the long-awaited Niedertalbahn, which will be made by TSG, short for Trainsim Germany. It's the same developer that made the Vossloch G6 diesel shunter, and is apparently still working on remaking the Deutsche Bahn BR420 electric multiple unit. Maybe once that's released, Hauptstrecke München to Augsburg will finally be at least vaguely interesting. The Niedertalbahn is notable as it will be the first non-electrified German route in the game. All previous German routes have been focused on electric railways, examples including Mainz Bahn from Aschaffenburg to Gemünden, plus the severely underwhelming Hamburg to Lübeck and Kassel to Würzburg, so this should be a welcome and refreshing change. And maybe in the future we could get Hamburg to Cuxhaven as well, or somewhere where the Deutsche Bahn BR612 could run away from the wires for once. Looks like the line is only 31 kilometers or 19 miles long, and it runs from Bad Vilbel to Stockheim. The former is also served by line S6 of the S-Bahn Rhine-Main network. The route will include the BR628/BR928 diesel railcar in the old Minz livery, rather than the more common Deutsche Bahn Red, I don't like the livery myself, but it's a welcome change from the usual red. Though personally, I would have preferred it if we got the DB BR245 diesel locomotive hauling coaches instead. Sure, this is yet another really short route, but I'm thinking I'll still pick it up because I want some variety and a break from the mediocre electric routes like Halbstrecke Rhein-Ruhr. On the subject of German routes, another one that was in this announcement is Linke Rheinstrecke Mainz to Koblenz. This is quite interesting because it's going to be set in 1997, complete with the vintage BR103 and BR110 electric locomotives, although the latter already comes with the questionable Bremen to Olenburg route. This route is around 90 kilometers or 55 miles long, and I'd rather they remake the entire Frankfurt to Koblenz route, on which Mainz Hauptbahnhof is a major station. I don't like this ongoing trend of only remaking parts of older TS Classic routes, rather than the whole thing. For example, Ruhr-Sieg Nord only includes the Hagen to Finnentrop section of the old Hagen to Siegen route, and the next add-on I want to mention is another partial remake. Credit where it's due, I do remember enjoying the scenery between Mainz and Koblenz, where the railway is running alongside the Rhine River, and I'm looking forward to driving along this section in TSW, though I question why it will be set in the late 90s. Looks like the next US route we'll be getting is NEC New York to Trenton. This is a partial remake of the old New York to Philadelphia route in TS Classic, and from what I gather, DTG doesn't have the Scepter license, so they couldn't add Silverliner 4s or any other Scepter rolling stock to represent the commuter service between Philadelphia and Trenton. That's quite frustrating if you ask me. What you do get with this route is some New Jersey Transit rolling stock, making this the first time we've seen NJT in the game. Specifically, you get the ALP-46 electric locomotive and multi-level coaches, which we already have in TS Classic. Another thing that we have in the old game, but is inexplicably omitted from the TSW version, is the Arrow 3 electric multiple unit. Perhaps that's why DTG made the baffling decision to not include the tiny Princeton branch, because of the extra time and effort they conveniently don't have to model the Arrow 3. I am absolutely sick of DTG always doing this sort of thing, making short and linear routes with no branch lines, regardless of how short said branch line is. Need I remind them that the Princeton branch is only 2 miles long? Besides the aforementioned NJT rolling stock, you'll also get some reused Amtrak equipment, in the form of the Siemens ACS64 and Amfleet coaches from Boston Sprinter, although personally I think they should have done the AEM7 instead. However, they are adding the Metroliner cab car as well, which we haven't seen since the long-dead NEC New York add-on. This thing covered the Newark Airport to New Rochelle section of the Northeast Corridor, and a later add-on gave us the SW1000R switcher and Metroliner cab car. But for reasons I can't remember, NEC New York was never updated for TSW2 or TSW3, and annoyingly they're not including the SW1000R with this New York to Trenton add-on. Trust Dovetail to keep making questionable or outright stupid decisions. The last American add-on in this recent torrent of announcements is yet another pointless reskin pack, just like what they did with the Class 66, Dispolok BR182, and a Santa Fe F7. So clearly they think this sort of farce will still sell no matter how pointless it may be. This time they're adding the 6 Union Pacific Heritage units to Sherman Hill, so basically it's just a pack of reskins for the EMD SD70 ACE. I don't care for this pack, not just because I'm tired of these questionable reskin packs for locomotives we already have, but also because I never got the TSW version of Sherman Hill. Those long US routes focused on those stereotypically heavy freight trains have never interested me. And besides, the original Sherman Hill and TS Classic still holds up today despite being around 9 years old. Skyhook Games, the same people who made the Corus Railway and Class 58 in TS Classic, are also making a route for TSW3. It's a section of the Midland Mainline from Leicester to Derby and Nottingham, because including Sheffield as well would be too much to ask. I mean, they must really hate anything to do with Def Leppard. Motive power wise, the route will include the Class 43 HST and Class 158 Sprinter in the old East Midlands Trains livery. At only around 30 miles long, and in a part of England I have little to no interest in, I don't think I'll bother getting this route. Not sorry to hurt any fanboys' feelings, but this is just too bland of a route concept for me. It's almost as bad of a concept as Crewe to Liverpool. Lastly, we have a fairly significant announcement, for it's the second steam-era route in TSW. This time it will be Peak Forest, from Ambergate to Chinley and Buxton, a route that has mostly been lost to time, though the section from Matlock to Ambergate is still in operation. I don't know how long the route is, but it had better be longer than the pathetic 36 miles we got in Spirited Steam. And of course, it looks like it'll be set in the British Railways era yet again. Because clearly, Dovetail Games are absolutely hell-bent on ignoring and not believing in any previous era of steam locomotives and routes. The motive power they will be providing is the LMS Fowler 4F, an 060 tender engine that will be brand new to the game, alongside the blatantly reused Stanya 8F and 6P Jubilee locomotives from the Crewe to Liverpool pack. I've heard of unoriginal hacks, but this is ridiculous. Why are they including the 8F and Jubilee again, when they could just as easily include another new locomotive, or better yet, at least 2 new locomotives? Three examples of what they should, or at least could have included, are as follows. The British Railways Standard Class 9F 210, which was the basis for Murdoch from Thomas the Tank Engine. Then the LMS 4P Compound 440, based on an old Midland Railway design. And the LMS Ivett Class 4MT 260, otherwise known as the Doodlebug. Despite my criticisms, I'm hoping that Peak Forest would at least be a massive improvement over Crewe to Liverpool, given how much of a disappointment that thing was. Further credit where it's due, it's good to see another Steam era route being made for TSW, although I just wish it wasn't set in the damn BR era again. It would have been nice to get the bizarre Cromford and High Peak Railway as well, which featured the 1 in 14 Hopton incline, and at least one cable-worked incline. Included motive power for that section could have been the J94 or Hunslet Austerity 060 saddle tank. So there you have it, the long list of add-ons that were just announced, as well as my thoughts on them. It's hardly surprising to see the devs continuing to make short and linear routes, and I just hope that this trend will mostly disappear as time goes on. People have already lost interest in the game, not just for the aforementioned reason, and I have a feeling that more and more people will lose interest if this linear route trend continues. But I just hope that, at the very least, the add-ons I'm interested in will be decent in their own right. Surely it can't be all bad, right?